All right, guys, what's going on? It's Coach Bronson here with my mom, Claire, and we are going to talk about how to squat. We're going to talk about how to get set up for the squat. We're going to talk about some of the things that people do that make squatting harder, faults and incorrect movement. Then we're also going to talk about how to scale it and things that you can do to make it easier if you have just limited ability, if you have an injury or something like that. All right. So the first thing we'll talk about when we talk about how to actually squat is we're going to talk about where do we place our feet. Okay, it's called our stance. And most of the time what you want to do is you want to have your feet just outside your hips. So if she's going to put her feet just outside her hips, if you think about where your shoulders are, they kind of go straight down right there. So if her arms are, if she just kind of lets her hands hang here, they should be right about where her toes are, right? If you look down, you can kind of be like right over the top of your toes, okay? That's a good spot. Some people may need to come in, some people may need to come out a little bit, but this is a good place to start. If you're not sure what that width is, then here's a trick you can do. Go ahead and bring your feet back together so they're right under your hips, and then you're just gonna pop your heels out and then your toes out, boom. And that's a good way to get started with a good squat stance. So when we're squatting, after we have our squat stance, what we're gonna do is she's gonna send her hips back first, okay? So all the weight goes on the back side of her body, and then she's gonna let her body drop down as far as she can. Give me one rep. Good, and then up again, okay? That's a squat. That's all there is to it, guys. Go ahead and turn sideways, face that way, or this way, whichever, okay? She's gonna do the same thing again. Notice all the weight goes back, so as her hips come back first, just do your hips first. Hips come back first, and then she drops down, good, and then comes up again. The goal, how do we know she got a good squat? What we want is we want the crease of her hip, where her hip actually bends, to be below the top of her knee. So this part right here, below the top of her knee, and then come on up again. Good. And then we're also looking for making sure that all of her weight, most of her weight is coming back here. When she's in the bottom of her squat, she should be able to wiggle her toes. Wiggle, 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 and then up again. Nice. Okay? That's a good squat. Now, some things that we see people do often incorrectly, or not incorrectly necessarily, but they may have weakness or a movement pattern that they don't really have locked down as they develop their strength in the squat, is we'll talk about three things. One is leaning forward too far, okay, with their body. One is squatting through their toes instead of keeping their weight in their heels. And then the other one is letting their knees cave in. This is a common one for women, having that hip strength to maintain the position of the knees, okay? Something you've dealt with, right? Yeah. So what we're gonna do, we'll start first with leaning over. Oftentimes, yeah, when people are doing their squatting and they squat and they're leaning way forward, it's because of the flexibility in the back of their knees, or the back of their ankles. So go ahead and just do a good squat. A good squat. Okay, notice her body is leaning forward a little bit, but she's more upright than not. Go ahead and stand up. Good. What happens, go ahead and do it incorrectly where you're leaning forward a lot. More, more, more. There you go. Good. Now she's really leaning forward. Go ahead and stand up. Okay, that's not what we're looking for. The reason what we're looking for there is if your knees are, if your ankles are tight and your knees stay back when you squat, you have to lean forward in order to maintain your center of balance, your center of gravity. So if you can let your knees, if you can loosen up your calves, loosen up your ankles, and let your knees come forward, notice as my knees come forward, my chest automatically rises, okay? So if I'm squatting like this, okay, where I can't keep my head up and my chest up, then that's because the back of your ankles are tight and you need to work on that. Cool? All right, the next thing we have is coming up on your toes, or pushing through your toes. So remember when we talk about squatting, we want our weight back here. We don't want to push in through the toes, coming up, especially coming up off our heels. We don't want to do that. So go ahead and show what that looks like from the front. Okay, leaning forward, good, then good, fix it. Come back and then stand. Good, do that from the side. Okay, watch her heels come up off the ground and she's leaning way forward as she squats. Good, she's using a lot of her quads. Go ahead and sit back and fix it. Heels down and then stand. Good, okay? So you notice when she's leaning forward like this, this is the part of her leg that's really doing all the work. It's a lot of stress on the knees, it's a lot of stress on the calves, and then it's a lot of stress on the quads. The squat isn't supposed to be just quads. It's definitely not supposed to put a lot of strain on the knees. So if you have bad knees, if you have knee issues, you definitely want to make sure that you keep your weight back here, right? Remember, you should be able to wiggle your toes when you squat, so all your weight's back here. You don't necessarily need to lift your toes up, but you should be able to if you want to, okay? Not here like this squatting, okay? Then the second thing we have, or sorry, the third thing we have, common issues with people squatting is knees caving in. So what we can do, what I like to do is think about having a wall on both sides of your legs and you're trying to touch your knees to the wall as you squat. So you're rolling your hips and you're trying to push your knees out as you squat. Good. And then stand up. Good. So notice your knees, once they go out, they stay out. Good, and do it again. Good, pushing out and then stand up. Good. So what we talk about knees caving in, go ahead and do a set where you just let your knees go. Right? Good, so you do it again. Right? So her knees start to come together to get closer as she stands, right? As opposed to staying out and keeping pressure. So what that does, that puts stress on the knees as well, right? And we don't want that stress because our body is not meant to support weight internally. It's meant to support weight externally with the bones going out like a bow and arrow, okay? We don't want them caving in like this, okay? So that's a big thing. There's a couple different exercises that I have on YouTube that you can look at for how to strengthen your hips and work on keeping your knees out. But that's definitely something to look at if you have an issue with that. Okay, so those are 3 faults. Scaling. Were you able to squat when you first started squatting? Get all the way down? You remember? So long ago. So long ago, right? Oh my gosh, right? The biggest thing that we have, particularly for people who have not done exercise before, is just feeling like they can go down and trusting that they can come back up again. There's a big fear factor in going down. They're like, oh no, I'm stuck, right? So what we can do to alleviate that, when you're first getting started, is use one of these things. Okay, so go ahead and face that way. Right? It's real easy, guys. Squatting is sitting down and standing up. That's really all it is. So if you're not sure, then you can just sit down and stand up. You can do this with your body weight. You can grab a dumbbell, a kettlebell, whatever, if you want to add weight to it, and just practice the key portions of it as far as keeping your weight in your heel, okay? Starting with your hips and trying to keep your chest up. As you feel more comfortable with that, you can get something that's lower to the ground. You can get a medicine ball, you can get a stool, you can just find something and get closer to the ground until you get to a point where you don't need anything, and then you can do it on your own. That's the easiest way to scale squats, guys. Okay, you don't have to do them if you don't feel comfortable. What we want is we want you to work on going as low as you can where you feel comfortable. Don't add weight if you don't feel comfortable. And work on those things that help you perform the movement correctly before you increase the number of reps, the weight, and all those kind of things, right? Anything we need to add?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Thanks.